Hi, and welcome to Reed's Audio Reading. I'm Reed, and I hope you enjoy my channel. Today, I'll be reading the module Bloodstone Pass, specifically chapters 5 and 6. This module was written by Douglas Niles and Michael Dobson. Chapter 5 The Bloodstone War. The preparations have been made, and now the evil forces of the bandit army gather to impose their will on the poor citizens of Bloodstone. This chapter describes the engagements of the Bloodstone War. Use the timetable of events in Chapter 4 to determine when these battles take place. The following battle descriptions lists which enemy forces are involved, their strategic and tactical objectives, and the effects of each battle on the morale of the Bloodstone units. The various attacks by the bandit army happens regardless of the circumstances. The PCs may choose to make a counterattack on the enemy camp. This chapter also contains a description of that camp and the defenses that will be employed against spies or invaders. The actions of the PCs may alter the timetable of events, especially should they attack the bandit camp. Use common sense in dealing with these changes, always remembering that the mysterious grandfather, the evil force behind it all, is a man of incredible genius. He should always behave in the most intelligent way possible and is almost never fooled. As mentioned earlier, the PCs have a vast range of options in this war. Using common sense and assuming that the enemy leaders are intelligent, modify the enemy tactics to cope with the situation in the best way possible. The enemy attacks. Approach of the enemy force. Map 5A shows the main route that the enemy force takes from their camp to the village of Bloodstone. It is automatically used on the first attack and may be used on subsequent attacks unless the PCs place serious obstacles that prevent its use, such as major terrain modifications or disguise or magically defenses that actively restrict access to the village. If half or more of the approach to the village is blocked, the enemy army divides itself and makes the approach shown on map 5B. If the enemy army uses the alternative approach, any giants that are with the force make a flanking attack across the stream. If there are no giants, half the force is diverted to the alternative approach. The enemy army commander delays the attack long enough that a non-giant force can build wooden bridges to ford the stream if the main bridge is blocked or destroyed. Each battle scenario describes the tactics of the enemy army as it approaches the village. This procedure may be interrupted at any time by PC actions or decisions. If the characters elect to fight a battle at some distance from the village, you may set up the battlefield using the features shown on map 3. If the battle is fought just outside the village, use the features shown on map 4, including the village itself. Battle 1: The Tribute Collectors. The Bloody Sword unit of the Fleet Brigade, commanded by Felix, a 10th level assassin, and accompanied by 6 stone giants acting as heroes, is assigned the job of collecting the Fall Harvest tribute from the village of Bloodstone. If Jameson was able to report, Felix is aware that there are adventurers in the village and is suspicious and prepared for trouble. He is confident, however, that stone giants will take care of any opposition. If Jameson did not report, Felix is not prepared for resistance. The collecting force is also escorting a train of 50 pack mules, which will be used to cart the tribute away. The force approaches by the route on map 5A and deploys in a straight line in open formation when it gets within 200 feet of the village gate. 2 stone giants flank either end of the line. Felix and the 2 other stone giants swagger into the village to order the villagers to cart out the tribute. At the first sign of trouble, Felix and the stone giants order the bloody swords to charge, and then try to get to positions of safety, fighting anyone who stands in their way. The bloody swords charge, confident that they can overcome any opposition. Once it becomes clear that the Bloodstone forces are too powerful for them, the bloody swords break and run for home. Bloodstone morale effects. Modify the morale of each Bloodstone unit following the battle using the list that follows. All morale modifiers in the subsequent battles are cumulative. Tell the players after the battle which morale modifiers were applied and the reasons for them. +1. The enemy force was driven from the field or annihilated. +1. None of the enemy forces escaped. +1. No Bloodstone figures were removed as casualties, includes figures recovered later under case or by healing spells. -1, 4 or more Bloodstone figures were removed as casualties, as above. -2, any militia figure was removed as a casualty, as above. Battle 2, the Punitive Expedition. The loss of the tribute collection force does not pass unnoticed. 1 week later, a much larger enemy force descends from the enemy fortress. The actions and makeup of the force depends on how much information the grandfather obtained about the new allies of Bloodstone. If any members of the tribute collectors escaped, or if Jameson sent a report following the battle, the punitive expedition consists of the entire fleet brigade, minus casualties from the Bloody Sword unit, and the Goblin Brigade. The fleet brigade commander is Felix, if he is alive, or Welcar, identical stats of Felix. Use same roster block description. The Goblin Brigade commander has his own roster block. The army commander is the fighter Timoshenko. The magic user Zarek and 6 stone giants accompany the force as heroes. If no information about the fate of the tribute collectors reaches the grandfather, the force consists of Fleet Brigade minus the Bloody Sword unit, commanded by Welkar, the Black Arrow unit of the Goblin Brigade, and 6 stone giants, Zarek and the army commander Timoshenko. The objective of the punitive expedition is to discover the fate of the tribute collectors, if not already known, and to punish those responsible for the attack. They also will try to collect the tribute that the first expedition failed to gather. They will first try to crush any opposition and then will burn several dozen homes and kill a few hundred peasants. They will try to capture the ringleaders of the opposition and bring them back to the grandfather in chains. Failing that, they will try to kill the ringleaders. Depending on their prior knowledge, they will use either the 5A or 5B route as appropriate. Bloodstone morale effects. +2, the attackers were driven from the field. +4, no enemy figure escaped. +2, no Bloodstone figures were removed as casualties, as in Battle 1. +1, only 1 to 5 Bloodstone figures were removed as casualties, as above. -1, more than 6 Bloodstone figures were removed as casualties. -3, an entire Bloodstone unit was removed as casualties. -2, any militia figure was removed as a casualty. Any unit of the grandfather's army that escapes with at least 1/3 of its original figures will be reinforced to full strength before the next battle. Units reduced to less than 1/3 of the original strength remain at their reduced size for the remainder of the campaign. Battle 3, Midnight Attack. The next assault on the village occurs in the middle of the night and is intended to terrorize and intimidate the villagers before the grandfather's army descends upon them the following day and wreaks complete destruction. The attack contains 3 parts: an assassination attempt on each PC, coupled with an attempt to kidnap Lady Christine, an unholy rising from the graveyard of the buried relatives and ancestors of the village residents, summoned by the monstrous cleric Banach, and a quick raid by the Warhooves unit of the Fleet Brigade, intended to burn as many buildings as possible. A. Assassin attack. Each assassin is invisible at the start of this encounter. They will sneak into the village undetected and make attacks as described below. The assassin force consists of 1 assassin for each PC, plus 2 assassins to kidnap Lady Christine, plus 1 assassin to open the town gate for the war hooves. The assassins automatically get into the village unless there are specific defenses that prevent it. You should already have standard schedules for the routine precautions that PCs have taken. Roleplay the individual assassin attacks. If the assassins can reach a PC undetected, they make an assassination attempt using the Assassin's Table for the Assassination DMG, page 75. Modify the chance to assassinate based on the precautions taken by the PC. If the assassin does not surprise the PC, he must make a normal attack. He cannot make an assassination attempt. 2 assassins attempt to kidnap Lady Christine and carry her from the village. If they succeed, they take her to the enemy camp and hold her as a hostage, demanding that Baron Trenth surrender the PCs to them. If the PCs surrender, see Chapter 6. If the PCs attempt a rescue, see the key to the enemy camp section in this chapter. The last assassin remains just inside the village gate and opens it just before the third prong of the attack. The Warhooves arrives on the scene. B. Graveyard Nightmare. The evil cleric Banach, a devoted minion of the demon lord Orcus, casts Silence 15 feet radius on himself and moves to the top of the graveyard at midnight. At the exact time the assassins strike, he calls upon his master's control of the undead to summon forth an undead army from the graves of the villagers. Standing in the center of the graveyard at the top of the hill, Banach first dispels the Silence 15-foot radius spell and begins a deep chant. One round after he begins to chant, a huge column of flame erupts from the ground surrounding him, shooting orange, purple, and green flames hundreds of feet into the air. A loud roar is emitted by the flames, and the booming chant of the cleric is amplified so that it drowns out all other sounds on the hill. Four demons arrive on the next round to protect the cleric from attack. Four Type 3 demons. The demons can use all their special abilities except Gate, since Orcus has sent what he feels to be a sufficient number of demons already. Each game round following the eruption of the flame, a number of undead figures rise out of the grave and head toward the village, attacking anyone they encounter. In the first round, 160 skeletons, 16 figures emerge. In the second round, 120 zombies, 12 figures emerge. In the third round, 80 ghouls, 8 figures emerge. And in the fourth round, 20 wights, 4 figures emerge. In the fifth and subsequent game rounds, the pattern is repeated until Banach is stopped. The battle system game information for all undead figures is given in the army roster book. When the flame surrounds Banach, he is completely invulnerable to all attacks, magical, mental, and physical. The only way to defeat him is to remove the glowing skull-shaped amulet of Orcus that he wears on his chest. Any character who makes a physical attack on Banach or who tries to grab the amulet takes 2 to 12 points of fire damage, save versus breath weapon for half damage. To remove the amulet, a character must make a successful 2-hit roll as if the amulet were AC -3, and then make a strength check to break the chain and pull the amulet free. When this happens, the flames instantly stop and no more undead rise. Those undead that have already risen turn away from their attacks, shuffle peacefully back to their graves, ignoring any attacks against them. C. War Hooves Ride. This attack occurs 4 game rounds after Banach begins to summon the undead, whether or not Banach has been stopped. The assassin concealed near the gate opens the gate, assassinating any guards on duty, and the Warhooves unit rides into town. Each orc waves a burning torch and tosses it into or on top of a hut or store in the town, causing it to catch on fire. 1 to 6 buildings catch on fire for every game round the Warhooves remain in the village. Once on fire, a building automatically burns to the ground, but the fire does not spread to neighboring buildings. All inhabitants of a burning building automatically run out into the street. None die in this matter. The Warhooves ride through the streets and ride down any villagers they encounter. They retreat if they suffer more than 25% casualties or after 10 game rounds in any case. D. Villager reactions. As soon as any kind of alarm is raised, the villagers pour forth from their homes and mill about in the streets, panicked. Place counters or figures on the table at random to represent the Bloodstone militia and regular unit members. Figures that were already on guard duty are not affected. Treat all figures as routed when they first reach the street. They must be rallied by a PC before they will be able to do anything useful. If the undead reach the village before any villagers have been rallied, any unrouted villagers begin a movement phase within 12 feet of an undead creature run at the routed movement rate in the opposite direction. Bloodstone morale effects. -1. If any undead figure is eliminated by bloodstone figures. -1. If 1 to 9 buildings are burned by the Warhooves. -2 if 10 or more buildings are burned by the war hooves. -1 if 1 to 3 bloodstone figures are eliminated by the undead. -2 if 4 or more bloodstone figures are eliminated by the undead. -1 if Lady Christine is successfully kidnapped. -1 for each PC slain by an assassin, even if restored to life later. Battle 4, The Last Battle. The grandfather cannot have his plans thwarted, and so much now try to destroy the resistance and crush the spirit of the citizens of Bloodstone. If he fails, his plans to project his power throughout the remnants of the Kingdom of Vales will also fail. Therefore, he has decided to commit his entire army to the task, victory or death. The midnight attack of the previous night was designed to soften up the village and make them fear the might of the oncoming army. And now it is time to make the threat come true. All surviving forces of the army, including heroes and wizards, joined together for the last grand offensive. Prior to the battle, the wizard Nelik casts haste spells on all heroes and the entire Wrencher unit of the Heavy Brigade, Hill Giants. In addition, Nelik casts Globe of Invulnerability on himself before moving into battle. The enemy approaches using either 5A or 5B as appropriate. The wyverns, under the effects of Charm Monster and Haste, fly into the battlefield to touch any strange items that the grandfather or Nelik suspect may be illusory. If they survive, they are then ordered to seek out and attack enemy spell users to try and disrupt their casting. The grandfather fears enemy spell casters above all else and has told Nelik that his first priority is to neutralize enemy magic. If possible, Nelik uses teleport and power word stun to take out the most powerful magic user on the Bloodstone side. This is a battle to the death. The grandfather calls upon Baron Thranth to surrender at the start of the battle and does so again if the tide turns strongly against Bloodstone. If the players elect to surrender, go to Chapter 6. The grandfather will not surrender under any circumstances. However, if the grandfather is killed or forced to use his Ring of Returning and the army has suffered over 50% total casualties, or if the grandfather is still on the field and the army has suffered over 75% total casualties, the enemy army's morale breaks and it routs from the field. Because of the size of this engagement, you may wish to recruit a few friends to help you run the grandfather's army. Because of the powerful magic users on both sides, this will aid considerably in speeding up the scenario. One more note, the PCs have had a chance to practice tactics on some easier battles up to now, so pull out all the stops on this one. The Camp of the Bandit Army. This section describes how to find the enemy camp, the nature of its defenses, a description of the camp, and its likely reaction to attack. Location. Nestled in a box canyon high above Bloodstone Valley is the muddy and crowded camp of the enemy army. Not by chance, the box canyon also contains the entrances to the long abandoned Bloodstone mines. The only character in the village who knows where the camp is located is Jameson, the spy. Captured enemy troops, of course, also know this information, as do the orcs in Chapter 2. The best information that the Baron has available indicates that the camp lies to the east and north of the village. A ranger can attempt to follow the trail left by the army after any of the expeditions listed on the timetable. The number of creatures in the raiding parties makes this attempt almost certainly successful. If the PCs elected to seek the camp by searching the surrounding mountains, they will almost certainly fail to find it if they search on foot. If a flying PC searches the correct region of the mountains, allow a one-third chance of discovering the camp per day spent searching. The only way to approach the camp on foot is through the narrow entrance shown on the map, unless the characters wish to spend several days scaling cliffs and negotiating icy ridges in order to approach the camp from the mountains. A small party of characters accompanied by a skillful thief can possibly make such an approach, but a unit of troops would find it impossible. Of course, airborne characters may approach the camp from whatever direction they choose. Defenses of the camp. The camp is thoroughly guarded 24 hours a day, with the following precautions always in effect. Guard posts. Each guard post marked on the map of the camp is garrisoned by two stone giants at all times. The stone giants bombard any intruders with boulders, whether or not the army members in the camp are also within line of fire. Sentinel. A 12th level assassin is constantly posted on a broom of flying, circling over the camp, covered by an invisibility spell. The duty of the sentinel is not to attack intruders, but rather to alert the grandfather and his chief lieutenants, so they may take appropriate action. Note that the same assassin is not always on duty. There are six who alternate this task. The other five are located in the grandfather's command tent. Key to the army camp. The camp is organized into several separate settlements. The open areas between these settlements are muddy and always occupied by 100 to 400 orcs, goblins, ogres, and hill giants. The description of each area reflect the usual occupants of a single structure in that area. The cliff walls surrounding the canyon reach 100 to 150 feet above the floor of the canyon. To determine the height at a given spot, add 1d6 times 10 feet to 90 feet. The top of the cliff provides a somewhat level ledge before climbing again at the massive mountain heights that tower as much as 5,000 feet above the camp. Unless specifically listed, the only treasure to be found will be the standard personal treasure for creature types as listed in the monster manual. 1. Entrance. The mouth of the valley is a narrow gorge enclosed by 150-foot tall escarpments. The walls are rocky and the floor is muddy. The gorge slopes steeply uphill towards the camp, one elevated chance every 6 feet for battle system game purposes. 2. Orc tents. Each tent contains 1 to 12 orcs, fully armed and their tattered sleeping gear. The stench is overpowering. 3. Goblin tents. These tents, even dirtier and more ragged than the orcs' tents, are the quarters of the Goblin Brigade. Each is likely to be occupied by 3 to 18 goblins. 4. Human tents. These are the quarters of the Shadowfoot unit of the Fleet Brigade, as well as a number of low level assassins apprenticing under the Grandfather. Each tent will contain 2 to 12 level 1 fighters, 80%, or 2 to 12 level 3 assassins, 20%. 5. Giants Barracks. These huge wooden structures house the hill giants of the Wrencher unit, the ogres of the Blade Breaker unit, Heavy Brigade, and the stone giants that serve as camp guards and heroes. A single barrack will contain 50% 2 to 12 hill giants or 50% 1 to 20 stone giants. 6. Mine entrances. These tunnel mouths are supported with rotted timbers and sagging support beams. Each leads into a network of old mine shafts and corridors. Spiders and bats abound in here, and a vague sense of menace is apparent to any character passing a wisdom check. A detect evil spell reveals a faint but positive response. These mines actually lead to an ancient and very evil shrine far below the surface of the ground. This shrine, when approached with the proper phrasing, becomes a gate to one of the lower planes. This provides Banach with his link to Orcus. PCs poking around in here may, at your option, stir up some of Orcus's minions. 7. Command tents. These three tents are the quarters of the grandfather, Banach, and Nelik, respectively. Each is plush and well appointed, with fine rugs, crystal, drapiers, etc. The five assassins mentioned under Sentinel above will also occupy the grandfather's tent, while Zarek shares the tent with Nelik. If Lady Christine is successfully kidnapped, she will be held in the grandfather's tent, guarded by the five assassins. Each tent contains 10,000 gold pieces in coins, gems, and jewelry, as well as the magic items listed for each NPC in the roster book. Response to attack. At the first indication of attack, the grandfather and his lieutenants will gather in the grandfather's tent to strike back. Nelik places a globe of invulnerability around the group, while Bannock gates in a Type 4 demon. The demon immediately attacks the intruders, while the NPCs ploy to combat the threat with whatever spells and attacks seem most effective. If any army approaches the camp, which must be through the bottleneck entrance, the hill giants will quickly group into a closed formation and charge into the pass. Chapter 6. The War Ends. If the forces of evil win the war. If the war goes against Bloodstone, the enemy leaders call upon Baron Thranth to surrender and deliver up the heroes. The decision whether or not to surrender is always made by the players. If the players do not surrender, the enemy continues to attack. If they win, they do their best to destroy the village and its inhabitants utterly, and capture or kill the PCs as well. This is an extremely unlikely outcome if the players are playing at all well. If the players decide to surrender, say because Lady Christine has been captured, the grandfather calls off the attack. He orders the Baron to chain the PCs and deliver them to him. He sends a unit into the village to burn a few buildings and kill some peasants as an object lesson, and has Baron Thranth killed. He forces Lady Christine to marry him and assumes the title of Baron personally. His men take all weapons and magic items away from the PCs and take them in chains to the camp. There, the grandfather meets with them and says, "You should be more careful who you work for. These peasants are not worth your time and trouble. I have no hard feelings, but I can't have you bothering me. I will keep your possessions, but I will give your lives if you swear never to oppose me again." If the PCs agree, he turns them loose and watches them leave the valley. If they choose to return, they find that the village is under heavy guard and the villagers enslaved. It will be a hard task to free them now, but perhaps it can be done. If Bloodstone wins the war. If the forces of Bloodstone win the war, the likely outcome, there is a great jubilation. The Baron heaps honors upon the PCs and tells them that they would like them to stay here forever. If they agree, he uses the resources of the village to build them fine houses and gives them all knighthoods. If Lady Christine has fallen in love with one of the PCs, and if the PC acted properly, the Baron gives his active consent to a marriage and then abdicates in favor of that PC, making him the new Baron of Bloodstone. If a PC becomes Baron of Bloodstone, we recommend that you study the section on running a Dominion in the D&D companion set as well as the relevant sections of the DMG. Of course, the material of the D&D game will be modified slightly to work within the AD&D system. The political situation in the South is in turmoil, and it is possible for players in the Battle System campaign to add to their dominions and build quite an empire. There is also the matter of the lost Bloodstone mines. They cannot be presently worked because of the gates to the lower planes. You can design quite an adventure to have the PCs clear out the mines and bring fortune back to Bloodstone. Alternatively, you can adapt an existing AD&D module to place dungeon horrors deep in the Bloodstone mines. For even greater challenges, watch for future Battle System game releases from TSR Inc. Thank you for listening to this audio reading of Bloodstone Pass, Chapters 5 and 6. I hope you enjoyed, and have a great day. Best regards, Reed.